Welcome to the Trumpet of the Last Few Days. I'm Stanley Farrar.
And I'm Joshua Farrar.
Who's distractedly looking for...
What was that?
Exactly.
I'm a little out of it. My sleep schedule's been messed up for work, so you can probably tell with the bags under my eyes, the general vacant stare.
Typical drone reaction.
Yeah.
Well, they found out that by studying the various film and by researching the people involved, they found out that besides having Trump supporters invading the Capitol, they also had Black Lives Matter protesters wearing Trump outfits, instigating it and stirring it on. And of course, in the process, they're blaming Trump for it. But we know it was all a setup because as NPR published the account of the Trump supporters violently taking the Capitol at 9:30 in the morning, and according to the BBC, the first gates weren't removed to where they could get past the gates to even get close to the Capitol until after 1300.
Wow.
So
Goes
it was
to
a
show
setup
that
and a half.
they're well practiced at manipulating mob mentality.
Oh, very well practiced at manipulating mob mentality. And they know, and we know that QAnon propaganda was also heavily involved because there's video of them going through Pence's notes looking for the evidence to prove that for him to suddenly spring on the country to prove that the election was fixed, and all they've discovered was that Pence had every intention of handing over all the votes to Biden in the first place.
Which we figured he would.
Yeah.
Because QAnon had stated, but QAnon had stated that Pence would save the day and bring out the evidence, and Trump would get it for 4 more years.
They have more faith.
He had no intention of.
Well, they had more faith in politicians than politicians really deserve.
A whole lot more faith. The thing about it is that it was fixed from the word go, and the Black Lives Matter protesters and the Capitol Police winding up the crowd and encouraging them to go in just succeeded in shutting off all avenues of bringing out the evidence to show that the election was a violation of the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
Admittedly, it wasn't going to come
because
out,
Cruz was trying to set up an investigative committee, and they were going to be put in a difficult position not to go along with it until that happened. They killed it.
It's still an excuse.
Now, I'm not saying that that his committee would have worked, or even that he would have got it, but it would have shown just how big of traitors they were up there. As it is, they have the cover of the mob. Now the impeachment has taken and go on.
they've done a lot of things under the cover of the mob.
Yeah.
Not excluding the impeachment, which is a farce.
Oh, the impeachment is definitely a farce, and according to constitutional scholars, it's unconstitutional to impeach somebody after he's no longer president. Yet they intend to who still have the process going after he's out of office.
Since when did the law ever mean anything to the Democrats? Or
It's the
to most of the
Republicans who were
Republicans, for that matter, actually. But let's be
Well,
honest, chocolate
there are
mousse has more substance than a politician's morals.
True.
A chocolate mousse?
And we know that when it comes down to the morals of the people we've got in Congress right now, they're all about well, maybe not all of them, but a large portion of them are crooks.
Yeah.
Most of them, except for a few exceptions, there are either crooks or crook wannabes.
Remember that peacefully and patriotically are incitements to violence.
Yeah, peacefully and patriotically are incitements to violence. So we have to be very careful how we word things, or else we get pulled from YouTube for inciting violence.
And the president obviously
we're not
needs
even
to be
getting
more
most of our
careful.
views from YouTube. They can take a flying leap.
We're actually getting most of our views on LinkedIn. And BitChute. At times, Rumble will give them a challenge.
Yeah, at times.
YouTube almost never does.
But nobody's given us our 12.5 cents.
When did we get 12.5 cents? From what?
Because that's a bit. The point of a bit shoot is to shoot people bits.
No, a bit it is a small amount of data. It takes 8 bits to make a byte.
Well, more specifically, a bit is a measurement, and using the imperial system, which is a system of fractions, an eighth of anything is a bit of something.
Yeah, but the original slang term for bit was the going exchange rate between the American dollar.
No, it predates that.
I looked it up. It was the going exchange rate between the American dollar and the Mexican peso, which is why 2 bits was 25 cents. It took 8 bits to make a dollar. Hence why 8 bits is a byte.
It predates that due to the saying, "I'll be there in a bit," which is an eighth of an hour.
Well, Biden states that in the first 10 days he's going to sign 12 executive orders. We don't know what the 12 executive orders are exactly. We only know a few of them that he's released. We know that he's mandatory masks nationwide.
You almost said globally.
the I almost said globally, yeah. The DACA reinstated, Obamacare reinstated, the the environmental restrictions reinstated, rejoining the Paris Accord, rejoining the Obama era treaty that was never approved by Congress with Iran for the nuclear deal. So he's going to ensure that Iran gets the nukes.
So
The
I don't know about the others, but one of those is all talk. At minimum, one of those is all talk.
Which one?
The masks one. Because they can't put up their facial recognition Big Brother towers if they can't see anyone's face.
Oh, in many ways, it's an advantage to those who want to take and cause as in damage and destruction. Because you throw on a black hoodie with its hood up, with a black mask on, and who knows who you are?
Zorro. You're Zorro. But to answer your question,
we could take
the
and go through
shadow
and say,
knows.
but he only knows the evil that lurks in the hearts of men.
And that's not hard to learn, actually. The evil that lurks in the hearts of men.
Oh my.
But when you take and you look at the basically, you could say that the mask program is the BLM Antifa and enabling act.
You mean order, because it's an executive order.
Order. That's right.
Well, they got to do something
yes.
to enable their brown shirts.
It's to enable.
Mm-hmm. And yes, for those of you slow on the uptake, I just called them literal Nazis.
Which is probably a bit soft for them.
Well, they're
to be honest.
Which that ought to get us a nice strike on YouTube.
Like I said, we're not even getting most of our views from YouTube. They can take a flying leap.
But yeah, that's probably a little soft for them, to be honest. A lot of them are just hard communists.
Yeah. Well, they're already talking re-education camps.
I was talking about BLM and Antifa. I wasn't even talking about the politicians.
Well, Biden's advisors are pushing for re-education camps. Of course, he's going to open the borders back to the Muslim terrorists, so they can get in more easily. So we ought to start. So besides having domestic terrorists, we should have foreign terrorists to deal with as well.
And we're going to see an uptick in school shootings, just like what happened under the Obama era.
Yeah. And probably more mass shootings too. Because once they outlaw the guns, what's to stop them?
Well, they want to put AR-15s under the National Firearms Act. Make you pay a $200 tax.
They want to put magazine. He wants to make a 7-day wait period for nationwide for the purchase of any semi-automatic firearm.
It's like 90% of firearms that are sold.
Yes.
So to put that in context for people out there, basically, if it's not single action, it's at least semi-automatic.
No, double action isn't considered semi-automatic. If it's not a revolver or a lever gun or a pump gun, it's semi-automatic.
Even then, they could just twist it
Well,
to where the fact that you can pull the trigger multiple times in a row without having to cock it is in of itself a semi-automatic, and it technically is.
yeah, they could. Yeah.
It wouldn't be hard to twist that. It wouldn't be hard to define semi-automatic in their terms. That's why I said if it's
Yeah.
not single action, it's effectively semi-automatic.
He states that he wants to take and do away with FDLs too,
Mm-hmm.
which those are the people with the license where you can send a gun to them and somebody can go pick it up from them. There's a fee, but they can, but it's a controlled process of transferring firearms through the mail,
Yeah.
and he wants to do away with that.
Wind noise is getting pretty strong on your end there, Dad.
Yeah, it picked up this for a gust and then dropped back down. How's it now?
Better.
But if he does away with the FTLs, that's going to raise a lot of ire. Put a lot of people out of work too. He's planning on shutting down that national pipeline that's bringing oil from Canada down.
Yeah, the Keystone Pipeline.
Yeah, the Keystone Pipeline. He wants to shut it down. Ban fracking. Ban and all drilling on public land. And then reinstate the Green New Deal. Oh, instate the Green New Deal. Yeah,
not to mention the $15 minimum wage, which will kill our economy.
$15 minimum wage is in his stimulus bill that's before Congress right now.
Stimulus bill. The economy killing machine.
It's a $1.9 trillion.
Yeah.
You know, this is going.
Required,
you guys are probably going to disagree with me here, and that's fine. But if the $15 minimum wage got rid of tip culture, I'd be fine with it.
But it won't.
Yeah.
No, it won't.
Yeah, I know it won't.
It's just gonna.
But if it did,
what Trump put forward would have gotten rid of the tip culture.
What did he put forward?
Because that all businesses that receive every tip, a business that receives tips has to take and split it with the people behind that work behind the scenes, like dishwashers and busboys and such.
Mm-hmm.
Which, unless they were making above minimum wage.
Personally, though, if I was a lawmaker, so to speak, I would have banned it on the fact that it's a predatory business practice. It allows them to on paper give their employees a lower amount and get taxed a lower amount as a result, while simultaneously on paper having lower prices for their actual product than is actually being charged. In fact, it's not that much different than under the table deals. It's not ethical, for one thing.
I don't have a problem with tips per se. I have a problem with mandatory tips.
I don't have a problem with
Where you go,
entirely voluntary tips. My problem is when they are using the tips as an excuse to not pay their workers because they'll just make it up in tips.
now I have a problem with that too, but it still should be negotiated between the workers. I don't believe in minimum wage.
I agree that it should
Minimum
definitely
wage
be.
should be zero.
I definitely agree that it should be negotiated with the workers. But the whole fact that this concept is normalized and it makes it to where where tips are all but mandatory in most places, and in some places they are mandatory, is just wrong.
Mm. Oh, I won't even go to a restaurant that requires a tip.
Yeah, same.
If because the whole point of a tip is to encourage good service.
Encourage excellent
And
service above and beyond.
so I yeah, and so I'm not going to give a tip if I don't get good service. So if they're going to take it out of my take and add it to my bill anyway, forget it. I just won't go.
Yeah,
Now I still believe that the minimum wage should be zero.
I agree.
You negotiate.
But I also think that they
You
should be.
negotiate with your employer.
I think the employers should be a little bit more upfront with their contracts as well, which they definitely aren't. They try to hide a lot in there.
Oh, of course they do. Now, the thing about it is if you take and pay your employees too little, then you have to bring down your cost of your goods, or else people can't afford to buy them.
Yeah,
But when you're taking and forcing a minimum wage, you're forcing the cost of goods up. It's a death spiral.
Well, they don't. It doesn't just force the cost of goods up, because a lot of the time, businesses, in order to keep the cost of their goods down, will just fire their employees.
Well, there's that too, because you can't sell them if it gets too high.
yeah. No
One
one
thing
will
they're
buy
running
it.
into is all these people have been on unemployment since the COVID started because they were laid off because of the shutdowns. Well, now the businesses are being charged a higher tax rate because so many people being on unemployment.
Hmm.
Because unemployment's paid by unemployment tax. So now the businesses, when they reopen, have to pay more per per employee because the state required them to lay off their employees.
Which is another kind of death spiral.
Mm-hmm. We have all kinds of economic death spirals going on in our country right now. And Biden already states that he's going to take and undo the Trump tax cuts, and then he's going to raise taxes above that. Now, the rich don't pay taxes.
Yeah, they'll always find a way out.
They pay. They take and find a loophole or a way out of it, and they use lobbyists to make sure those exist, or they pass on their taxes into increased costs of goods and services, so the cost of living goes up.
Hmm.
All these things cut the general public's throat. Now, if you take and look at our society, 45% of our society before COVID was on some form of government assistance. What's it now?
I think it's closer to 60, 70%.
I I'm sure that's probably true. We take and live in a society that is killing itself. And a lot of it goes back to that great reset that they want to do. That build again better is the motto for the great reset people that wants to take and destroy the economy of the entire world and reset the whole thing as socialists.
I still don't understand how they can try to build that as a conspiracy theory. It's on the front page of the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, it's on the front page of the World Economic Forum, and they're claiming it's a conspiracy theory, which so clearly it's not a conspiracy theory. I guess the only conspiracy theory is are they doing the insanity they're doing in order to be part of it? We know that the majority, that all the Democrats and the majority of the Republicans are globalists. So the World Economic Forum pulls a lot of weight with them.
Rethink global capitalism.
It has been.
They want to do.
It has been speculated that if the red states secede, that the red states and Australia would be two of the only places not destroyed by the reset.
Depends on whether or not England manages to keep this Brexit thing going.
I mean, Brexit's happened. It's done.
Oh, they're
It's a done deal.
Yeah, it's happened.
Yes, but you know just as well as I do that there is a substantial number of people that are trying to get it done away with.
Speaking of that, the SNP, the Scottish National Parliament, has had their teeth pulled recently by the British Parliament, pulling their power because of all the insane things they were doing. That, and they filed a petition to join the EU, and they took and started up a new referendum to try to become independent from Great Britain.
Well, they should have had their teeth pulled for the embezzlement thing.
Yeah.
Yes, they should have.
I forget, how much were they embezzling?
Millions.
Millions of pounds. Stockpiling the royal pound so that when they took and become independent, they'll have the money to take and deal with what they need to deal with. Not taking into consideration at all that if they become independent, they'd be running off a different currency. The pound would be worthless.
Yeah.
For them.
Well, not necessarily.
It'd be like here in...
They could choose to keep with the same currency system.
No, because they have to get permission from Britain to keep the same currency system. It'd be like if the red states secede, they would start up a new dollar.
They'd have to.
But that new dollar, after they replaced all the everybody else's money in the bank with the new dollar, if they backed that dollar with something, it would automatically become more valuable than the US dollar.
Yeah. They could back it with copper and it would be more valuable.
Yeah. At this point, they could back it with dead leaves and it would be more valuable.
Especially with the way the U.S. government's printing money.
Yeah.
But if they backed it with copper, they backed it with silver, they backed it with steel, it would be more valuable. Hey, aluminum.
Hey Josh, you want to start making handbags out of our money, or are we not to that point yet?
Hard to say. So, an interesting thing about it is that they're functioning on the idea and the economical theory that a healthy inflation rate is at about 2 to 3%. So now there's a lot of theoreticals here, of theoretically this, theoretically that, but in a situation where your money is backed by something, and this is the kind of theory they are espousing. I'm not saying if they're right or wrong. If your money is backed by something, then it can't technically inflate. It can only deflate as it gets in the hands of people who don't spend it. So the more people hoard it, then it deflates and becomes worth more and more because less people actually have it. So their 2 to 3% inflation rate is proof that your currency is actually moving around and not just staying in the hands of the few. So considering this whole COVID thing, where suddenly everyone's on unemployment, and no one's getting paid anything, and no one has a job, the currency has started to deflate rapidly. So they've been rapidly printing money in order to force it into about a 2 to 3% inflation rate, which once the economy semi-recovers, will skyrocket to about a 400% inflation rate in a matter of weeks, as soon as people start getting paid again.
Which means that they have to keep the economy depressed so that it doesn't do that.
Yes. And the way to do that is to make sure nobody can get a job, therefore force extending COVID far beyond a point where it's actually an issue.
Which, by the way,
Which doesn't fix anything.
Their mentality goes completely contrary to why money was invented in the first place.
Yes, it does. Now, Biden states that that in his first 100 days, they're going to have 100 million inoculations done in the United States.
Now, are those the double shots or the single shots?
So 100 million people inoculated.
Well, would it matter if you take the
He didn't
vaccine or
specify.
not? You still can't go out without a mask, and you're still not allowed to get close to people, and you're still not allowed to work a job, and you still can't go to church. What's
Think
the
about
point?
There's a reason a lot of people aren't taking it.
You would have to have a million people a day inoculated. And he plans on using the National Guard to do it. Now, does that sound like forced inoculations to you?
It does.
But for one thing, Pfizer and Moderna both have stated that they can't make enough vaccine to do 1 million a day.
Pfizer has stated that it does plan on making 500 million doses for the U.S. this year, though.
This year. But that's not 1 million a day.
Well, take a third of that because it's the first 100 days, and you could about 3.5, but still.
So I found out where I was working.
Yeah.
Specifically, while I was kind of on Christmas vacation, they were going through and vaccinating all the people that I was working with. So I came back to a form that I was required to fill out saying that I had opted out of the vaccine because I wasn't there to take it, which was a interesting situation. The sort
You
of
didn't opt out. You just weren't there.
yeah, and regardless, they're using this paperwork to cover their backs. It's simultaneously annoying and kind of amusing.
Now, in Indonesia, they're having a wonderful time. They've had a 6.2 earthquake, which destroyed enormous amounts of people's homes, killed unknown numbers. They still are looking for the dead.
But it's okay because they're
Has
all wearing masks.
Put them into temporary shelters. A volcano erupted there right afterward, and now they're facing monsoon weather.
Oh, so they really need
And
prayer.
people, yes. So here we have of our government trying to destroy us, and there, they actually have problems.
Yeah, real problems.
Yeah, Islam.
Oh yeah, Islam, but
Indonesia has the largest population of Muslims in the world, if I remember right.
yeah, it does. You could argue that they're facing the wrath of God for their heresy.
Well, I wouldn't say that they were, considering all the heresies in all the individual places in the world. I
They're definitely
don't think
for tough times.
I don't think Islam is any worse than the ladyboys of Thailand, or other such heresies.
Oh, the entire Asian continent is full of pagans. But then again, majority of the United States is full of pagans. It just amazes me that I know several people that are, let's say, very disappointed in the outcome of this past corrupt election, and think the world is ending, and it may end at any time. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but there are places that morally are a whole lot worse than we are. But we've been at a higher plane, and by falling to a lower plane, are asking for God's wrath. uh, I know guys that still think that Trump's going to be the next president.
A lot would have to
Why?
happen between now and Wednesday.
Yeah.
Being he's conceded, I don't think it's physically possible. There's no way they're going to let him be president. Even if they took and proved that the entire election was rigged, lock all of the people up that were involved with it, they could drag Biden out in chains for his corruption and shoot Harris as a traitor, and they still wouldn't put Trump as president.
You're
If
probably
anything,
right.
they would try to make
There's
Pence
no way.
president and work from
No,
there.
they'd
No,
probably
they
try
wouldn't even let
Pelosi.
Pence be president.
I said they would try to make Pence
Pelosi
president.
would be president. Pelosi would be president.
Well, you already said that they would have
She's
shot all
third
the
in line.
traitors, so I assumed that Pelosi was already out of the equation.
Oh, but you'd have to shoot.
I didn't say
virtually
shooting
all of
all the
Congress.
traitors, but
I was under the
you
impression
have
that
to take the white Congress out.
the traitors who were who rigged this election in the first place were already shot, so therefore Pelosi was already out of the equation.
Okay, that was something I hadn't calculated on because I figured that the Congress would
then-
be exempt.
Then it would go to the most senior member of Congress, who I forgot their name, but they're in their 80s and are not in good health.
Pelosi's in her 80s.
But she's not the oldest person in Congress.
Well, the most senior member of Congress is not the oldest member of Congress. It's the person who's been in Congress the longest.
Yes, which also happens to be one of the oldest people in Congress, if not the oldest person. in this case.
Yeah, but
No,
that's incidental.
I think that all the octogenarians that are in Congress right now are Democrats. Though McConnell's getting awful close.
I don't understand how the Democrats can control the narrative so much. They're always like, "Oh, the Democrats are the party of the youth." The Republicans are on average younger than the Democrats.
It's because they run the media, and they have their indoctrination machines running overtime in the colleges.
Yeah, tell me how the colleges are doing right now. They're good at killing their own plans.
Oh yeah,
I'll
colleges
tell
are
you one
falling
thing.
apart.
Yeah, they are.
Biden's made some people mad by already backing out of one of his promises.
Why?
Which
What did he
one?
do?
The forgiveness of all college debt.
We all knew
He's going
that
to
was going
forgive
to
the
be the
student
first one up on the chopping
loans.
block.
Actually, I thought he was going to go through with it.
There's no way. If
They
he
don't.
forgives all college debt, then he loses all his backers in college, because all the college professors are no longer getting paid. So they no longer have any reason to
Now,
indoctrinate their students.
I think that while Trump was still in and they still had a majority, they should have taken and done away with all guaranteed student loans.
They didn't do
Yep.
anything. When they still had the majority, they did
No,
nothing.
they didn't, except fight Trump.
Yeah. There were so many good things they could have done that they didn't.
Well, a massive number of Republicans retired during that time period because they didn't want to work with Trump. They were Democrats and claiming to be Republican.
On a side note, though, as Brett mentioned in our previous episode, if this whole inflation thing skyrockets as much as I had anticipated or stated earlier on in this episode, then student loan debt will effectively be forgiven.
It's true. Virtually all loans will effectively be forgiven.
Yeah, that's true.
So maybe
Banks
it's
will go
not
under.
quite as on the chopping block as was implied.
Just for those of you
Well,
who see it coming, get ready your items for barter and trade. Your money's about to be worthless.
There's 50 acres of land south of here, about an hour south, that is running for less than $1,000 an acre.
Pick it up, wait for it. No, that's crooked.
No, that's good business.
No, it's crooked. When you see it coming and you do that, that's just scummy.
Less than $1,000 an acre. Man, I kind of wish I was in the States to take advantage of that. I could
How many
actually
acres?
liquidate some of my assets before it's not worth anything anymore. Put it in land.
Yeah, it would
Land is a good investment.
$48,000 for 50 acres, and it's already posted.
And that would be nice. Probably doesn't have anything on it. Otherwise, it'd be going for much higher.
Just,
But
I
land,
think it might have a gas well on it, natural gas well.
ooh,
Then why is
Would
it
you get
going
the
for
rights
so
to that?
low?
You don't get mineral rights
Ah,
why not?
because the people who own the mineral rights aren't going to sell the mineral rights. You might get a percentage because to let them on and off your land to work on it.
But then you
A
don't.
lot of times they'll take and give free natural gas to the occupant of the property.
If you don't own, I mean, if you don't get the mineral rights, do you really own the land?
It's a weird.
Is
You can do
natural
anything
gas
you
even
want
really
to
a
with the
mineral?
land,
No, natural gas
Pretty
isn't.
sure it's a chemical.
but they classify it under mineral rights with oil. But at least that's what they suspect that the one squared off clearing on the property was.
Ah,
It's possible it may have a clearing for a house there that nobody's put a house on.
I mean,
But
I could afford either the
yeah,
land or a house. I couldn't afford both.
well, the thing is that like you were saying, and you take and put your money into land, the land isn't going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
it's it'll be yours even if the whole country falls apart. You'll still own the land
Yeah.
unless the socialists get their way.
Then redistribution.
It's,
Yeah, but they're not going to redistribute on land that isn't in commercial use.
I wouldn't be so sure of that. They'd probably hand it over to the
They
government and
they
make it.
haven't.
no, Dad's right on this. They wouldn't distribute land that isn't in public use. They would just claim it that it belongs to the government.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be redistributed. It would be stolen.
I mean, redistribution is theft too. So
Oh yeah, but it's the rob from the rich and give to the poor argument that they would use. That yes, they are stealing it, but they are giving it away. Therefore, it is for a moral cause. They wouldn't even try with land like that. They would just steal it.
now,
Now,
one
I suspect that if the red states secede, land's going to become real cheap real quick
Yeah,
because after all, there's all this government land that the government owns throughout all the red states that won't be owned by the government anymore. And the new government will need to raise money. The
yeah,
easiest way to do it would be sell land.
So real quick before we
So
end,
all these national forests.
because we're running low on time, I've got to get ready for work. The NRA has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
yeah. I saw a joke on that because the internet loves making fun of everything. Where they showed the headline and then the caption was, "Man, have schools really been closed that long?"
Wow. The key issue here is in order to file for bankruptcy, you typically have to be insolvent. The head of the NRA has insisted to the board members that they are not insolvent and that their finances are fine. So it seems to me that the only reason they want to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy is so that they can move their charter out of New York into Texas. So they're probably going to throw the book at the NRA.
Well, possibly, but they may argue from the point of view of they are insolvent in New York.
Except they're not
New
insolvent.
York itself is
They're
insolvent, so it's not a bad argument.
They're being investigated in New York. They want out.
From what I understand, they don't own any real property in New York, except one office building.
But I don't know, it's up to the judge. Though if half the things that they said were true,
And
if half the allegations against the NRA are true, they are crooked.
there's pretty strong evidence that they're crooked, and they really need to be replaced by another organization doing the same thing that isn't crooked.
Which there are a couple of organizations that do that, specifically the Second Amendment Foundation and one other that I can't remember the name of off the top of my head.
Used to be the NRA was the main lobbyist for gun rights. Anymore, that's not the case. They actually don't do all that much lobbying to protect your rights. They mainly line their pockets.
Well, the moral of this story is never trust a lobbyist.
And don't listen to your lawyer when they when they tell you not to move out of New York after New York's passed a bunch of anti-gun laws.
Yeah. I don't understand why they're still in New York in the first place, because they have nothing in common with the culture up there.
They could
Though
probably
they're
get some sympathy in
finally
upstate New
waking up to
York,
the
just not
fact
New
that they're
York
destroying
City.
their own economy. Yeah, but the politics are run by the big cities.
Yeah.
And it
And
is the DA that's charging them. So.
with how diluted
DA.
most of the residents of New York City are and how economy actually works, I don't think they will understand that their economy is wrecked until they are eating soup boiled from their wallpaper.
It has been suggested that that before everything's said and done, they'll probably be resorting to cannibalism.
Well, that's one step further than the
As
starving
the
time.
majority of the world.
Because the starving time, they got so hungry that they ate the leather off their shoes.
Yeah, but they don't make shoes with real leather anymore. Of course, they also don't stick up wallpaper with potato starch anymore either, so my analogy doesn't work either.
Yeah, we'd be eating glue.
Well, the I grant you that particular person was taking things to the extreme, thinking that the reset would drive the Europe, Asia, and the Canada, the leftist states that are currently in the United States, and Mexico into roving bands of cannibals.
I think they're underestimating the quantity and nutritional value of rats.
I also think they're underestimating the fact that Mexico already has a bunch of roving bands of criminals.
Well, there's no reason for Mexico to turn to cannibalism. They grow more than enough food to support their people.
Which is something that can't be said about Europe.
They're corrupt, but it can't be said about Europe. No, can't be said about Asia. But
China's
it can be said about the red states in the United States.
China is the number one importer of food, I believe, in the world, definitely in Asia. And they want to make China the dominant power in the world.
Yeah, that's because it's communist.
Admittedly, Rome couldn't feed itself either. It had to use Spain for that.
Let's be honest, there's only one part of Italy that can feed itself.
Sicily?
Sicily.
So that's basically Sicily could feed itself, but it can't feed the rest of the nation.
So we have the rise of the Sicilian.
Sicily already feeds half of Italy, itself included. But it can't feed the entirety of Italy.
Yugoslavia and the steppes of Russia
Ukraine.
have the capacity, and Ukraine have the
Ukraine is the
capacity
breadbasket
of
of Europe.
feeding Europe. They have more than enough to feed Europe and Asia. But because of their corrupt governments, they won't.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Yugoslavia doesn't exist anymore.
Okay.
Former Yugoslavia.
The artist
territory-
formerly known as Yugoslavia.
I don't know what all those little countries over there are called now.
Slovenia.
I have a feeling that in the near future,
Croatia.
the map's going to be completely redrawn anyway.
The
Yeah.
Balkans are constantly being redrawn.
Well, I think the world map will end up being redrawn because the United States is heading straight for a collapse.
And so is
So
China.
it'll break up
So is
into
Russia.
at least 2 to 3 different countries. China and Russia are overdue for collapse. And
Suppose we
without
are
us
bordering
propping up
on
the
that,
world
aren't we?
economy, there'll probably be many other countries.
Bordering. That's what they want to do, is open up the border.
But without the U.S. to prop up the rest of the world, the collapse will happen in multiple places in the world. You'll have warlords rise.
If the U.S. hadn't
Take over entire
coddled the rest
regions.
of the rest of the world as a general whole would be more capable of taking care of themselves. Should have stuck with the
Ideally
isolationist mentality.
Probably, but now they're not.
America always thrived under isolationism.
Yep. Globalism is deathly. But if you've taken and enjoyed what we've taken and covered today, or if you hated it, or if you flat just don't care but you found it entertaining, and take and feel free to subscribe, like, push it over onto your friends and enemies, is spread it across the nation so that many can hear the enlightening words we have to put forth. And we welcome you to take and leave comments, which we will be happy to read and most likely even reply to. Take and move forward and see a great transition take place in our country for the good or the bad.
And
And
speculate
until
of what
next
kind
time.
of globalist space dystopia we'll end up at.
I don't think we'll make it to space. But